In this tutorial, I'll walk you through the steps to create a new virtual machine using VirtualBox. You just go up to New, and you're going to give your virtual machine an identifiable name. I'm going to be installing Windows 7, so next, you're going to allocate the memory size. On my host machine, I have 16 gig. So for this virtual machine, I'm just going to give it 5. Now for Windows 7 64-bit, the minimum system requirements would be 2 gig of RAM. So I'm basically giving it a little bit over. Now you're going to create your virtual hard drive. I'm going to use the default VirtualBox image. You'll want to go with fixed. Now this is where you allocate the hard disk size. Now based on the size of your host hard drive, it'll dictate how large you want to make your drive. Also, if you're just testing out the operating system, for Windows 7 64-bit, the minimum hard disk space would be 20 gig. Now you'll want to choose your virtual hard drive location, and I'm putting my virtual machine on one of my larger drives. So once you've chosen the location, now you'll want to allocate the hard disk size. Now by default it's recommending 25 gig because it knows that the minimum system requirements is 20 gig for Windows 7 64-bit. Now I'm going to be doing a few tests on my machine and installing various programs, and my host machine hard drive is very large, so I'm going to be a little generous and give it 100 gig. Now keep in mind, if you use a large amount like I did, it'll take longer to create. So if you're just, creating a test machine, you'll want to keep it smaller. Okay, so now you've created your virtual hard disk. Now you have to set up your virtual machine. So I'll just right click, go into settings, or you could go up to this button up here. Okay, so there's several steps here. We'll start with this general tab, and in here, your snapshot folder, want to designate a default location for that. I've chosen one of my larger hard drives for it. Okay, now for the system, just review again. You'll want to make sure your I/O is enabled if it's a Windows machine. And my base memory. Now the processors, I want to give it 2. And the acceleration, yes, I want to enable, those should be enabled by default. Now, if you're wondering what VTX and AMD-V is, VTX is for Intel processors, AMD-V is for AMD processors. Now, if these two tabs are grayed out, you'll have to enable your virtual machine settings in your host machine's BIOS. And usually by default, that feature is disabled. So check out these screenshots of my own BIOS. So I've booted into my BIOS. Under the Advanced tab under CPU Configuration, I will see Secure Virtual Machine Mode enabled. By default, mine was disabled, so I went in and changed it to enabled. And It might not be named exactly the same thing in yours, but you will be looking for anything that's under virtual machine. So once you've enabled your virtual machine, then you want to exit and save changes. So next is your display tab, your video memory. Enable your acceleration and max out to 256. And I only want one monitor for this virtual machine. I never set that at all. Video capture, I only enable it just so I can set the resolution by default, and then I disable it. But say if your virtual machine is running, you can enable that with a keystroke while it's running, and your resolution will be already set. So that's why I did that. One thing to note about the video capture, there's no sound to it. It's just video. Okay, for storage, I just leave those as defaults for now. Audio, I leave those as defaults. Network, as long as by default it should be NAT, and I just leave those as defaults. And this is, of course, if you want your virtual machine to have internet access. I never bother with the serial ports. USB and shared folders. Now, shared folders is a really handy feature, and you'll want to set up a shared folder on your host machine, and on this guest machine I'm going to tell it where to find it. So now that that's set, and I want to auto mount it, so when my virtual machine starts, the shared folder should automatically be loaded into Windows Explorer when I go into it. Now before we start up our virtual machine, there's one other step I'd like to show you, and it's forcing a higher resolution. Under Display, you'll select Hint, and change it to the width and height that you prefer. I like 1080p. Then click OK. So those are the basic settings. So let's try powering this up. You can either right click and click Start, or you can go up to this Start button up here. Now you're going to tell it where to find the Windows image you're going to use for the Windows installation. Alrighty, so here's your Windows installation, and I'm not going to do the Windows installation in this tutorial. It'll be done in the next video. I hope you found this helpful. I'll see you again next time. Bye!